My name is Peter Allen, and I take pleasure in welcoming you to the Harvard House Hotel for a Chamber all candidates meeting. We'd like to thank the candidates, firstly, for stepping forward into public office, putting their names forward on a ballot for next Saturday. Many of you in the audience have had a chance to attend other all candidates forums, and we know that as Islanders we're extremely fortunate at the caliber of the candidates who have put their name forward in this particular election. But just a note on the format, the idea was that candidates would have 2 minutes to speak to their platform about themselves, their bio, in fact 2 minutes about anything they wish. And the Chamber has prepared on your behalf 4 questions that the candidates have been provided with and have prepared answers for. So those 4 questions will be asked by board members, and we will have the candidates answer question number 1, then question number 2, and so on. And they have selected, drawn a lot for their actual seat placement that will constitute the order of their opening comments. And every one of the candidates will have an opportunity to be the first to answer a question, as well as second, third, and fourth to ask one of the 4 questions. Following that, prepared questions, we will take questions from the floor. And my assistant this evening is no stranger. Perry, who is the chamber manager, has a clock. And she is also going to be spotting for your questions from the floor. We thought rather than having you line up at a non-existent mic, that we would just have you stand up, identify yourself, and pose your question to an individual, to either the CRD candidates or the trust candidates, or in fact, you can direct your question to any and all, and if you'll make that clear in the posing of your question, that would be great. And then we hope to wrap up at about 7:30ish. Now, George may mention this in his opening comments, but I'm to remind you that he has a previous engagement and must leave at 6:50. And it's my hope that we'll have finished the formal or prearranged questions. If you have a question for George specifically, you may identify yourself from the floor and ask that question so that he has a chance to answer that prior to his departure at 10 to 7. I think that's all we want to talk about in terms of format. And in terms of the responses to the prepared questions, it's going to be no problem for the candidates to keep that to 1 minute because they've had a chance to work on that. Responses to questions from the floor will likewise be 1 minute. And again, we'll give you the nod so that you know that. You're fairly familiar with the length of a minute now, I'm sure. So we'll begin with Peter Lam.
So thank you, Peter. I was told to introduce myself beforehand. I'm sure most of you know who I am. My background is in economics. I was an economist in the energy industry for quite a number of years, and particularly in sort of business economics afterwards. So I'm quite familiar with the needs of the business community. I want to start by really just maybe dealing with an issue that has been brought up in the past, and that is my recent role in the Conservancy, and the allegation perhaps that what I'm bringing to this position as trustee is the Conservancy viewpoint. I want to disavow that right away. I certainly make no apologies for what I did as president of the Conservancy. I'm no longer in that position, and certainly if I am elected, I will certainly consider that I would need to address issues with respect to all members of the community. But let me cut to the chase in terms of business. You all know that we've been promoting in our advertising preserve and protect and respect for the OCP, and that's certainly going to be a fundamental base for my position. But I also recognize that it is important, actually vital, that we have a local economy that works, that's sustainable, that it is local, and it is viable. we took a look at some statistics, and it's kind of interesting that we finally got, I guess, the numbers together. The largest source of income on the island is pension, investments, non-employment. And it's very clear that that's where the fundamental economy is based. And it does seem to me that while we are certainly interested in promoting business, year-round business, business that is sustainable, we also have to remember that we have a base on the island, which is that non-employment. It certainly includes the public sector as a major employer on the island. So while we are looking around for new business opportunities to try to spread the load for the tourism business, which is an essential part, we also have to remember that we have a base that we have to protect, and it's very important we do that. I want to make sure that we plan for that before we head off into other piecemeal solutions. Thank you.
Okay, the alarm is set. I first want to apologize for having to leave early. I teach tonight, and it was too complicated to try to rearrange 9 people's schedules to do this on another evening, especially when it was the last class in a long series. So I apologize for that, but I'm glad that I'm able to participate in as much of the meeting as I can. My own background, I've been a writer for quite a while. Before that, I worked in government in Ontario at the legislature for 10 years as an executive assistant, and in that capacity sat on, well, I think without exaggeration, at least 47 trillion different committees, working with community groups, working inside government, and participating with people from all sectors of the society and economy. It was a tremendous learning and proving ground. I've been a backroom person, and I've managed campaigns all across Canada, never been before a candidate myself, so this was a new adventure for me. And I think one of the reasons that I wanted to get into this, or at least was willing to get into it, was because of the passion that I keep hearing from people about their own concerns about this community, how much of a stake they think they have in it, and just how important it is for them. I hope that we can tap into that energy in a positive way, that we can use that energy instead of so many members of our community fighting negatively against things that they want to stop, that we can work positively to envision the kind of future that we want to build here together. I'm going to ask all of you for your imagination, your own ideas about things that come down the road, and not only that, your willingness to listen to other people's ideas and be receptive to them. I think we have to look down the road and decide where we want to be. There's a thing I'd like to call Salt Spring 2020 vision. If we could put Salt Spring 2020 vision together, know where we wanted to be by that time, I think we'd be serving our community really well. It's an important aspect of there's that old line, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. My 2 minutes are up. It's a matter of working together positively to build that kind of community that we all love. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. So I'm a little taller here. By now, at this point in the election, I've kind of been hoping that we've been getting used to this thing called banking time. And since that's not happening this time, I had a shorter introduction and longer answers, and I'll try and work that out. I just want to thank everyone for being here and thank the Chamber of Commerce for helping to organize this event. One thing about elections, and I've been in 2 in the last 6 months, is that you speak with literally thousands of people about the most important issues for individuals, sectors, and the community as a whole. From this, I've discerned basically one common theme that really seemed it came from everybody, and that's people want island values and good livelihoods for themselves and their children and the other residents. Now, they want this, but not at the expense of the very island that we all moved here for. Most want sustainability, but not everyone agrees or imagines what it could look like. All the same, we know where we want to go with that, and it is the responsibility of the Trust, the CRD, the Chamber of Commerce, small businesses, workers, basically all of us to help actually make that happen. We're already a diverse community. We're close-knit enough and small enough as a community to plan and enact a vibrant, sustainable economy that not only meets the OCP, but positively heightens it. That's my vision for our trustee. to help establish a model island community that flourishes socially, economically, and ecologically, to leave a legacy for our grandchildren that they'll thank us for. So I have the background, the ability, the interest and care to make this work and to represent our community with openness and respect. Thank you.
I feel really honored to be here because I don't know how many of you know it, but I used to work for the BC Chamber of Commerce for 8 years. I've been to every single community in this province that has a Chamber of Commerce. I've worked with business communities across the province, making communities sustainable, business communities vibrant. I've worked with business information centers, tourist information centers. So I come with a really broad background, and I think I really know what local business communities are fearing and experiencing right now. So as a trustee, I want to spend next term planning for our future instead of being in fear of applications that come forward. I found that over the last 3 years, we've had a lot of fear in our community about marina developments, about housing developments in our community, about affordable housing developments, and that hasn't been healthy for our community. It's actually pitted us against each other within our neighborhoods, business community against environmental groups, neighbors versus neighbors, and I haven't been really happy with that. I've heard people say we should be downloading properties, we should have a moratorium on development, and that's not healthy for our community. We have to face our fears, let the broad bridge down, and realize that people are going to come to our community and experience our community the way we have. I went to Arvid and Sid's Geezers for Trust, and when asked how many people in the audience were born on the island, one person stuck their hand up. And they said, when asked how they felt about what was going on the island, they weren't happy. So all of us newcomers, we have to learn to work with the islanders that are here and rebuild our economy. We're no longer fishers, farmers, or foresters. We work in the tourist industry. We work in the public sector, which is police, hospital, fire departments, and all of that sort of stuff. We have an agricultural industry that's struggling that really needs our help right now. And I think we have to spend the next term planning for our future rather than running in fear from the next application that comes around the corner. And as a trustee, I want to take you there over the next 3 years. And thank you.
Seen me before. I don't know how many of you went to the big meetings at Art Spring. I'm probably the most senior of the candidates around here, at least in terms of longevity on the island. Probably went to school with a lady that was at Art Spring, the one that was born here. So my concern was what is happening to people like her who have had a long tenure here and who are affected by the 5-year rotation cycle that seems to operate on quite a number of them who come in and then stay here for a while and move on. So these are some of the issues that I'm concerned with. Also, the part that bothers me a little bit is I'm not very happy with the gradual bureaucratization of local government. It's unreal. It leaves decision-making to the administrations and other entities rather than to the elected officials. And the net effect is that you can spend all your time in committees and nothing ever really ultimately happens except you've produced a mass of words and no action. So this is a tendency that I would like to reverse, at least within the CRD situation that I'm familiar with. Spent 3 years on a committee. I got precisely nowhere. Worse than that, it never had to be formed in the first place. All it required was a bit of leadership to deal with the issue. So those are some of the things I'm concerned with here. But other than that, I mean, I've enjoyed the job, and I always missed it, and the crowd in Victoria misses me too, for that matter. Let's face it. I mean, they find it entertaining, and you know, it breaks their day a little bit into something more than just bump and more bump, you know. So that's so I think we'll all be happy if I get back there, and I'll find something useful to do in my reclining years. And you know, I mean, that's the other thing. What are you going to do when you get old? Thanks very much.
Everyone,
Yeah, hard act to follow. And I didn't fall as I came down the stairs, so far so good. I'll have to. I don't want to make this a total speech. Everyone seems to be taking this rather informally, which is a good thing. My name is Gary Holman, obviously the incumbent in CRD for the last 3 years. And I think more than anything, and it's certainly one of the topics that we'll be discussing tonight, that I feel so strongly about, is trying to make our unique, fragmented, and rather strange form of local government work. As you know, I campaigned against incorporation 4 years ago, and I felt as a result of that, I had a responsibility, if I was elected, to try and make local government work. And I think on the CRD side, I think we have made it work, despite Dietrich's comments about sitting on a committee for 3 years and not accomplishing anything. He's referring to the Solid Waste Committee. The result of that was a consulting study that indicated that our depot was being run efficiently, and a commitment by CRD staff and Environment Committee to renegotiate the contract with recycling services. I don't think that's not accomplishing anything. In the past 3 years, we've upgraded Lady Minto Hospital. We have started construction on the new independent living facility at Greenwoods. We've upgraded both our Malaview and Ganges sewer treatment plants. We've upgraded or are upgrading Fulford and Bettis water treatment systems. We purchased a permanent site, 18 acres in Burgoyne Bay, for disposal and treatment of liquid waste. And we're beginning the construction of our first new indoor pool. We have secured $100,000 a year in federal gas tax transfer money that's sitting in the bank now. That will ramp up to $350,000 by the end of 2009. I think I can claim that on the CRD side of things, we have made governance work, and in the next 3 years, I want to continue that trend. Thanks.
Good evening, I'm Darlene Steele. I'm here to ask for your vote. But before I do, I feel that you need to know a little bit about me. I grew up dirt poor on the prairies, and when I grew up, I always wanted to go to university and become a veterinarian. But that didn't happen, because as it came time to go to university, my family did not have money to send me. So I ended up going to nursing school instead. Nursing school cost $50 and university cost a lot more. I never lost my desire to go to university, so the day after I graduated as an RN, I started university. I worked the night shift part-time, and I went to school full-time. I began what became the model of my life. I continued on and obtained 4 university degrees this way, 2 bachelor's degrees and 2 master's degrees. When I attended law school in 1984, I had 3 part-time jobs: a nurse at St. Paul's Psych Assessment Unit, on the night shift at the Vancouver Lodge for the Cancer Clinic, and I worked as an investigation officer for the Registered Nurses Association of British Columbia. I am the only person that graduated from UBC with a law degree, a paid-up house, and $5,000 in the bank, and no student loan. Okay? My marks were in the top quarter of the class. I am no stranger to hard work. Bill Curtin, in one of our debates, has stated that if I'm elected, I will send you into the poorhouse. What a joke, Joyce. I've been in the poorhouse. I'm not going back there, and I wouldn't take you there either.
I'm seeking election as your CRD director because I feel strongly about the need to address the challenges facing Salt Spring. I offer 14 years of experience with considerable understanding of CRD affairs and of off-island influences over our community. I have gained a broad and valuable education on many issues from a wide cross-section of our island. There must be balance and vision in the management and delivery of regional services. I offer leadership using a multi-talented team approach. I'm proud of Salt Spring's pool decision. We are building a multi-purpose leisure pool that will serve most, if not all, of our needs while limiting tax increases as promised. There is room on our paid-for, fully serviced community land for a new library with parking and growing space. A common-sense, prudent decision adjacent to indoor recreation facilities, our schools, and within easy walking distance of seniors and multifamily housing. Dietrich's suggestion of keeping the present site as a branch library or learning center is interesting. It could also be renovated into an archive study center with a downtown parking structure. If we want to buy land and increase taxes, let it be for necessary things like community housing sensibly located for families, seniors, and the young disabled. The present system under which we are governed guarantees that little will change. Exploration of options and reforms is needed. I'm not afraid of asking the province to fund and conduct a governance study. Together, we can make good decisions and usher in a new era of CRD, Islands Trust, and provincial cooperation. One that is accountable directly to local taxpayers and balanced representation and tax equity at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for that. We have to be firm but fair with respect to the timing issues. So on the next sequence, these are responses to prepared, or your prepared responses to our questions. The first question is going to be asked by John Cade, who will come up, and the others of you, the remaining 3 questions, if you come up and use the mic so the folks can hear the question, that would be great. In response, basically, the first question is going to be basically, as you see the candidates, Peter going first, through to Kimberly for the trust, and then Dietrich, yourself, through forward. Okay, thank you.
Somebody asked me if I was going to do a build-up to answering or asking the question, and I thought a captive audience and a microphone, this is my place. But and just for the candidates to know that, yeah, I've been off and on the island for over 40 years too, so I've watched it over a long time. And here is the question. There are some that believe little responsibility has been taken at the local government level for the economic well-being of our island. If elected, how will you support the economic component of community sustainability, jobs for working people, youth in particular, and a healthy local economy?
Thank you, John. It's certainly important that we do have a sustainable local economy. I think what I'd like to do is, to the extent that the Trust can facilitate it, is to support year-round business, to spread the load across the seasons. Improve the buy local arts and crafts, the value-added kind of thing that would give us a more sustainable economy. I think also we should be promoting the very benefit I think we have, which is the environment, and promoting sort of more ecotourism types of activities, low-impact recreation, the kayaking, hiking kind of things, and also to support a viable farming industry and housing for farming workers. And I think probably the key to all of those is that we find affordable housing for people that work in business downtown. It's obviously a key to having a sustainable economy, and we really must get onto the issue and solve the problem of providing really affordable housing for people who work in the industry.
Thank you, Peter.
When I saw the Chamber's 4 questions, I thought they were among the best questions we've been asked through the course of this entire campaign, and to try to do justice to them in a minute is really difficult to do. So let me just focus on one aspect of this question, and that has to do with agriculture and jobs and business, the business connection. I think there's a tremendous room for growth on our island between our farmers and our business people. When you look at the imaginative things that have happened with food products, Julie and Susan Grace's cheese, David Wood's cheese, Sea Change, things like that that are happening here on the island, I think there's tremendous room for job growth in that sector that helps keep agricultural land productive and helps to create jobs for young people right out of the gate in things that are not directly related to the retail trade. Again, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think as a community we need to think imaginatively about the kinds of things of where we want to be. We need to re-envision ourselves a little bit to decide what really should be going on here down the road as well as right now. And that's just one aspect of places where I think we have a tremendous room for growth. There are others, and there aren't time to go into them all, I'm afraid.
Thanks, George.
For this question of community sustainability, it seemed like there was three kind of key issues there for me. One was the island vision, other is in the areas of housing and long-term employment. In terms of an island vision, to be able to have sustainability, we need to be able to really look at the fact that we are on an island. There is a carrying capacity, and overpopulation and overuse of the resources is something that we need to learn from history and not follow down that path. I think for being able to help provide for young people and families and for a real healthy economy, it really is having a sustainable economic model that is year-round, that does encourage the diversity, the kind of diversity that we do have already in the community. And then tie that in with available and affordable housing that really meets the needs for people to be able to live on the island. When you have that kind of diversity in the economy, you've got that kind of diversity in the people and vice versa. I think there's a lot of ways that we can help to encourage this long-range economy, year-round economy, and that's extending things like the markets, being able to encourage people with small businesses and home businesses through different means of tax incentives, and I think that the Trust and the CRD are able to help us do that.
Great, Ken. Thank you.
The emphasis of our local economy should be on our rural economy that we've had traditionally. We're shifting, like I said before, from the fishing, farming, and forestry, and we've moved to tourism, agriculture, and our arts and crafts community, and I think this is where small business are very situated right now. We need to revive this rural economy for the islands, particularly to meet the needs of our community. So a lot of the food products that we farmers are producing, they can only feed 300 of us. We need to expand upon that. We need to focus on what we do well. That's providing pure and fresher foods, handmade goods, and responsible tourism are all areas that provide potential for healthy local economy. We also need to figure out how modern technology fits into all of this. We have to capitalize on the internet and telecommunications as people no longer have to commute and can work at their homes using those kinds of technologies. We need to really focus on farming. Like I said, we can only feed 300 people on this island, and there's a whole area there in organic farming, in producing the value-added products like cheese and wine and bread and jams, everything that we have. And we have to build markets for those in our restaurants and our local retailers. We need to be able to also diversify the farm incomes, and they can't rely solely on what they produce, but we have to look at the other non-farm crops, activities, and maybe agritourism for the farming community.
Great, Kimberly. Thank you.
You're supposed to say what you're going to do about it. Anyway, I gave this careful thought. This went through a couple of drafts. I didn't expect to hold this thing, but that's okay. It's correct to say that little responsibility has been taken for the economic well-being of the island. Some of this stems from the blithe disdain that politicians often show for the needs of the business community and the disregard they have for the economic consequences of their decisions. What would I do about it? Within my bailiwick, the CRD, I would ensure that first I don't get co-opted by the agenda of some of the administrative establishment, which, bear in mind, was there before you got there as a director and will be there after you're gone. And it operates a little bit like Humphrey in the Yes Minister comedy series, which you've probably seen. You know, the Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. Well, there's a little of that. I would also like to look to maximize the economic advantage of islanders vis-a-vis outsiders by ensuring that the ferry link doesn't work to the disadvantage of resident operators as opposed to those who are based elsewhere. We saw some of that at the Recycle Center. I would also seek to reverse, by persuasion, economically damaging decisions by the other side in the split jurisdiction. A significant...
Dietrich?
Yes?
Thank you.
Oh, God.
I know the feeling.
Thanks. I will try and address what I feel I have done over the last 3 years. Basically, the CRD has attracted about $6 million in grants to fund a whole range of infrastructure and social capital upgrades to Lady Minto, as I summarized before. That social capital, very important part of your local economy, not just private sector activity, but what happens in the public sector and how that's contributing. Affordable housing, absolutely a key issue. The Islands Trust has the most important tool there, being able to essentially create free land. CRD can provide assistance with some modest funding and grants and aid. I'll continue to work on social capital. We're doing feasibilities of public transit, which if we can get a secure federal and provincial funding, I'll establish some kind of publicly funded transit system on Salt Spring if we can get the federal funding. One thing I think we could look at is an economic development strategy. A while ago I had a workshop inviting the Chamber and the Conservancy where some of these numbers regarding economic dependency were presented. I would be willing to start up that process, and I think the Chamber and the community needs to think beyond tourism as the only sector that contributes economically to our community, as Peter made the point before. We have the data on this. We should be thinking about other sectors and not just tourism.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. I'm going to give a few moments back now because I took it earlier. I agree with the statement that local government has done little to improve the economic well-being of Salt Spring, and particularly for the business folk, yourselves. I think that we need to create low-cost and affordable housing so families can actually afford to live here. And we also need to enhance our tourist draw. We do need to recognize, however, that 50% approximately of our income comes from retirees who live here, and we need to focus on improving services for them, which in turn will create new employment. I would be prepared to work with the Chamber of Commerce to explore ideas which would create business opportunities on Salt Spring. I think they're absolutely vital.
The short answer is that the current system of governance is too disparate to allow a comprehensive economic policy, and neither the CRD nor the Trust has a mandate for economic well-being. The CRD is essentially a service provider of those things normally provided by a municipality, while the Trust function is now essentially a land use and planning organization. There is no local, truly representative Salt Spring body accountable to the taxpayer to manage any sort of economic program. Even in nuts and bolts matters like traffic flow and parking, there is little management. I will pursue a revised governance model.
Thank you.
George, thanks very much for recognizing the skill testing questions. The Chamber has a lot to offer, not just in questions, but we have lots of solutions. So we want to be included. Whoever gets elected, we'd like to be included in your decision making if at all possible. I have a question here related to tourism, and I'll read the question out, and before the candidates have a chance to answer, I'd like to offer a little bit of an explanation. The question is, tourism has long been a significant economic driver, accounting for more than 1/4 of the island income. The Malaspina survey confirmed an overwhelming support for tourism and a tourism management plan. If elected, will you expedite the establishment of a tourism advisory committee called for in the official community plan, and support a tourism management plan that's being developed in concert with all stakeholders, in particular business stakeholders? The first part of this question was talking about attributing more than 1/4 of tourism, attributing one quarter of the island income. That was attributed to Linda Adams at the Islands Trust, and Linda has been in contact with the Chamber, and that we likely have made a mistake there. But Linda kindly provided some follow-up data, or some data with the document that I think Peter and Gary have talked about tonight. Basically, in this context, tourism is the second most important employer on Salt Spring Island. It's 22% of the jobs. and tourism is also the third most important source of income on Salt Spring Island. So in the context of tourism being an important industry, I'll repeat the last part of the questions for the candidates. If elected, will you expedite the establishment of a tourism advisory committee as called for in the OCP, and support a tourism management plan that is developed in concert with all stakeholders, and in particular business stakeholders? Thanks.
Thank you. So George, you'll go first, and then Ken, Kimberly, Peter, and then it'll be Gary for the CRD. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for clarifying the economic data. Obviously, tourism is a crucial driver for our economy, and the fast answer to the second part of the question about would I support a tourism management plan that in particular involves the business community, the answer is unequivocally yes, and I think we could have moved on this much earlier than now. The key word in that phrase to me is management. It says tourism management plan. I think we have to be an island that recognizes itself as a resident-based community first. Because of the other economic activity on the island, the pension and investment income is here, and the largest employment sector is people in the public sector. And those parts of this island economy need to be strong and healthy for the rest of it to work. So we've decided already in terms of tourism that we don't want water skiing on our lakes, that we don't want casinos, that we don't want other kinds of activity here in terms of tourism, theme parks and things like that. But I think we do need to be more clear as a community about what kind of tourism that we do want. And I think that's where working with the business community to help establish that kind of goal and vision for ourselves was a crucial part, and I'd be happy to work with the business community in a positive way to try to help envision that strategy.
Thanks. As a short answer as well to the expediting the tourism advisory committee and the management plan, again, yes, that's a pretty a simple answer to that. Just to add into this as well, from my own point of view, I have a political filter that I've been using for a while that is basically looking at everything that comes through our community through environmental, social, and an economic lens. And through this, we end up getting, from my perspective, the broadest diversity and representation. And I would encourage that the stakeholders that are involved in this management plan would also be people that are from the many ways that people work and have business on this island, within the chamber, the tourist industries, the services, just enabling more people to be involved in the overall plan. I think that's the best way that we get to the best solution for the island's tourist management, and I'd be wholeheartedly in support of that.
Well, the tourism management plan was supposed to start once we finished with the vacation rentals, and as you know, it's been delayed once again because David Essig didn't show up for the public hearing. So just to let you know that the Tourism Advisory Committee is waiting to be appointed. We have a list of stakeholders identified. We just want to confirm that we have all the relevant stakeholders. It's anticipated that the Chamber of Commerce and the Island Sustainability Institute, newly formed by Marjorie Moore and Mike Stark, will play key roles in moving the plan forward. And they'll deal with the sides of the tourism management that's not, the trust deals with land use planning. We expect them to deal with the rest. As part of the Trust Council budget last year, I secured $15,000 to fund the tourism management plan. I also have an additional request for another $15,000 to move forward, so we have $30,000 in the bank to actually conduct the plan once things start. At the last local trust committee meeting, I actually put a motion on the floor that we could get a planning consultant in to do the terms of reference for the tourism management plan, and I'd confirm the stakeholder group so we could start in January, but that was tabled pending the outcome of the election. So the motions are there, and I'm prepared to untable them in November and actually move forward and spend some of that money we have in the bank. Trust Council in the spring, probably February of next year, we'll have a trust-wide tourism forum, and I would expect to see a lot of you in this room at that forum. It'll be really important because they will be setting the goals trust-wide that will feed into trust policies. So,
thank you. Peter, you're next. Sorry, Peter will be next, and then yourself, TJ.
I'm glad those numbers were also clarified. But it seems to me that whatever it is, whether it's 8% of income or 22% of the jobs, tourism clearly is an important sector. The survey that Kevin referred to, the Malaspina survey, certainly confirmed the value of tourism for the island, but it also mentioned some of the negative aspects of it, the impact on water, and those things I think need to be considered. I'm in favour of planning before any kind of piecemeal approach to projects, and certainly I support a tourism management plan, which will be done, I think, as part of the OCP review that will be held next year. The plan must recognise the value of sustainable tourism by preserving and protecting our natural environment, our sense of community, and the scenic values that attract visitors. To paraphrase a statement that was made many years ago, on Salt Spring Island, what's good for the environment, I think, is good for business. Thank you.
You'll get your turn. The tourism initiative is a trusted initiative, so the CRD I think would be playing a supportive role. I'd be prepared to participate if invited by the trustees, and I'd also participate to cost share if I felt that there was something in particular that the CRD could bring to the table, and if I felt it was in the broad public interest. Just to pick up a couple of earlier points, I really think it's important to have representation beyond the tourism and the business sectors on this group, because I think you want to design a plan that, just like our OCP says, you want to create an island where the residents want to live. If you create that kind of an island, and if you protect green space, then that will attract the tourists. Tourists are attracted by authenticity. So create the place that you want to live in, not necessarily the place that tourists want to come to. And I would just stress my earlier comment about the need to diversify our economy. I think cooperation between the CRD and the trustees is really important on any of these issues, and I think more than any other candidate I bring that to the table. I was chair of the Advisory Planning Commission during David Borum and Byron's time when we brought in our OCP and land use bylaw. So I think I have experience that none of the other candidates have on both sides of the trust and the CRD arena. And the data that we were referring to, that's data that I contracted with Gary Horn for to bring to that economic development workshop. So I was the one that had the data compiled in the first place, and I've worked with Gary Horn for a number of years. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I will most definitely support the establishment of a tourist advisory committee with participation from the business sector. I do realize, as Gary has already pointed out, that this is probably something that fits more tightly into the trustees' role. However, I do believe that there are issues such as this which affect the whole community, which the director should participate in wholly as well. We have been voted as one of the top 10 quote-unquote art towns in North America in the year 2005. This could be a huge asset for us. We need to capitalize on it. This and the fact that we have natural beauty and a rural lifestyle in Salt Spring can be highlighted so as to enhance our economy. I would really like to see more development of ecotourism so that we can make the most of our community.
Yeah, me too. I certainly support a tourism management plan, and the advisory committee establishment is very important. I have been doing my bit as an operator of an accommodation here on Salt Spring, and as a former retailer for 10 years, I understand tourism and the need to appeal to them. But most importantly, as was pointed out, we need to have balance, and if we create a place that people like to live in, the tourists will like it here too. The Parks and Recreation Commission, I think, is a significant player. We have trails, we have annual soccer tournaments, disc golf tournaments, skateboard competitions. We need to maintain these amenities so that we can be in a place to make ourselves happy, to live here. And tourists come and they pick up trail maps. They love to walk trails and go for picnics and see sights. We keep all that happening at a very low cost. It takes a fairly large chunk of the CRD local requisition to keep it happening. And we've been doing it very well. We have the lowest per capita parks and recreation levies of any community in the province.
Thank you, Bill.
Dietrich?
Well, it's good to see you getting almost a progress report on the status of the tourist management plan here. from everybody else, which is good, so I can capitalize on what they all said. I'm glad to hear that there's room for CRD participation in this, from what Kim just tells me. And obviously, I would hope that the stakeholders actually believe in tourism. There are some who don't. The fact that Linda Adams had to make some corrections tells me there's a lot of misinformation floating around about it. Personally, I don't think there are too many tourists on the island. After 9/11, the drop in American visitors was 40% at Moby's Pub, and I don't think it ever recovered to previous levels. Now it's Albertans and other Canadians coming in, and they're watching their wallets real carefully, so it has led to different spending habits, actually. This is a kind of scuttlebutt that I've picked up. So the season's short in any case, so tourist-dependent infrastructure sits idle and underutilized a good part of the year. But with the parklands that have been assembled since we got into the CRD parks function in '96, so you may recall that. Since then we've gotten a lot more CRD land plus a lot more provincial land.
Thank you, DJ.
This should be a slam dunk to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have Arlene ask our candidates question number 3.
Thanks, Peter. Well, I appreciate all of you being here, and the fact that we've put a lot of questions to you, some of them short and sweet, some of them with large concepts. The one that I have is not long in words, but definitely one of the ones that challenge you in concept. And the question is this: list, prioritize, and provide some solutions on what you believe to be the top 3 issues facing Salt Spring. And then we're qualifying that between the short term, which is we're saying 3 years, which would be your term, and the long term, beyond 3 years. So, what do you believe are the top 3 issues in your priority?
Thanks, Arlene. My main issues go back to, partly from having talked to a lot of people on the island, they do go back to housing, stable employment, and sustainability. And sustainability actually kind of overlaps all of the other categories. So directly, I think that a lot of, if we look towards the long term, we'll be able to help out a lot of short-term problems as well that won't turn into long-term problems. Initially for housing, I think that we need to really establish the immediate and appropriate housing, truly affordable housing for people who are in need. I think one of the ways of doing that is through, one of many ways is to legalize secondary suites for low-income rentals. In terms of stable employment and being both for seasonal and year-round, I think we need more local products and markets that bring local value-added products to the public here for purchase. Work with governments to maintain the many good jobs that we already do have here, like with community services and the schools, for example. We end up having the provincial government who will cut back so that we end up losing a lot of these jobs, and I think that there's ways that we can actually strengthen that. Facilitating grants. Sustainability in the long run is I'd look into development filters for appropriate development, try and reduce the runaway taxation, or get a grip on that, and encourage conservation and creative resource use on the island.
I picked 3 topics. I put tourism management, local governance, and affordable housing, and within those we have long-term and short-term goals. In terms of tourism, we're under the gun in terms of tourism. We have the national park coming online, we have the National Marine Conservation Area happening, and in 2010 the province wants to double tourism. And so I think we really need to focus on that in the short term, and I think we need to complete the bylaw 404 to regulate short-term vacation rentals, and then we need to move on to the tourism management plan and quit wasting time and just get on with it. In terms of local governance, we need to work with the community to improve local governance by identifying and implementing current opportunities for change. The 2 most immediate ones that would make my job a lot easier would be the increase the number of elected trustees to 4, and we need to look at a fair distribution of taxes within the trust area. And in the long term, we need to consider all options of government, and this includes a re-examination of incorporation as it relates to the locally identified solutions that we come up with versus those proposed by Trust Council and the province. In terms of affordable housing, this is something we'll be doing for the rest of our days on Salt Spring because we have to provide quite a stock if we're going to keep a sustainable community.
Thank you. Peter? Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. 60 seconds and a lot to put into it. My top 3 priorities are to have a long-term plan in place before we undertake any more piecemeal solutions. A long-term plan that addresses all sustainability issues, environmental, social, and economic. It'll be a visioning process, thinking long-term, thinking imaginatively, involving all sectors of the community to forge a future that we all want to have within our Preserve and Protect mandate. My second one is one that has been mentioned, is low-income affordable housing, particularly rental housing. There's a great need to do that, both to support the businesses on the island and also generally to have that kind of resident-based and vibrant community. My third one is also restructuring the trust. I certainly think and I would, if elected, make this a priority in getting better proportional representation for Salt Spring or more trustees, fair allocation of the resources that we get, and tax equity. Also to improve our coordination with the CRD. It's vitally important that we all work together and try to make this work. Thank you.
Nice, Peter.
Two of mine are similar to what others have said before, but I have one that's different. I agree that housing is a crucial priority for us. In the 5 years between 96 and 2001, there were 100 new homes built every year on this island. That's 2 a week. And our population went up by 30 people, which means that in 100 new homes, if that's all the people there were, that means that those homes aren't being occupied, and additionally, it means that families are leaving this island and retired couples are coming, so our numbers are going down, which means our school enrollment's going down, and it means that the stable base of your economic growth is going down along with it. Those are crucial things. We've talked about planning for responsible development and housing. My third item is the ferries, and I think we're a bit asleep on this one. The province has privatized the Ferry Corp, and they've told us that by April 1 of 2008, all of the ferry routes need to make their own money. No more cross-subsidization of the ferry routes. And if that does go through, we have 3 ferry routes coming to this island, all of which lose money. The Vesuvius Crofton sailing is probably real close to breaking even. But the Long Harbour Ferry loses tons of money, and the Fulford Ferry loses a lot of money. And if there's no cross-subsidization of those fares, everything on this island is going to cost more, the services are going to go down, the fares are going to go up, and that's going to affect tourism, business, and the residents in serious ways.
So Darlene is going to answer this question first, then Bill, teacher, etc. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to start with talking about governance. I think we need to look at possible forms of government which will increase our island representation and that can live harmoniously with the island's Trust, Preserve and Protect mandate. My top priority under this is I believe that we need an elected park board with limited terms of office, and I believe that this is an immediate need. This is one of my short-term choices. On a long-term basis, I think we need to look at some alternative kind of government that will work for us. There are 2 choices which need to be explored. One, I believe, is called Local Community Commission. This is a form of government which is elected by the people on Salt Spring, but remains under the CRD, which means that we would have 4 elected representatives plus our CRD director. So we would have 5 elected folk here from the island. They would work under the CRD umbrella, and there would be no tax increase associated with that particular model of government. The other model that I believe we need to do research into is incorporation. I know that the last time that we looked at this, there was a very large proportion of our community that were not in favor of it, 70%.
Thank you, Darlene.
But it's something that needs revisiting.
Short term, My first thing is we have to end ad hoc reactions to and micromanagement of issues. We have to stop dithering. I support establishment of an overall plan to deal with how we do things here and over long term. Ganges traffic flow and parking control is a short-term issue. There must be a way, and I have some really good ideas, of how to encourage employees, local businesses, not to use customer parking. And the other short-term issue is the increasing taxes from the CRD and trust creep, due primarily to downloading by the province, which is never accompanied by reductions in our rural taxes. I think governance reform is something we have to work on to solve that. Long-term, we need balanced development and development charges. We need affordable housing, and we need water supply. And I have ideas on those too. If anyone wants to explore them further, just ask me.
Thank you. Dietrich.
Yeah. My concerns have been kind of close to the ground. The short-term issues are dealing with infrastructural impediments. There are a number of areas where accidents are happening quite frequently. And what I'd like to see is some four-way stops on the island in various places. There have got to be some traffic controls. If somebody gets rear-ended, which happened recently at Central, and the excuse was, well, the guy who was rear-ending didn't know the fellow who was trying to make a left turn on Vesuvius Bay Road was actually stopped. Well, if he knows there's a stop sign, he knows he's going to have to slow down. It's a simple solution. It's tough to get it through the highways people, but we have a pedestrian safety committee to deal with that issue. And also I'd like to see that at Crofton Road and Lower Ganges. It needs something there too. There are a number of places that are really bad this way. The congestion in Fulford Harbour is a good example. That actually requires addressing BC ferries on it. Having a confab with them, I mean, where the terminal is now isn't where it was ever intended to take that kind of traffic. So those are the sorts of things that I'm concerned with. I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Gary's turn.
Thanks. I would say my short-term priorities are the same as the long-term ones, and I would characterize them as protecting our water resources, which I have tried to make my priority in the last term, demonstrating that local governments can work, making some simple improvements with some more significant structural changes as we examine the options and depending on provincial legislative changes. And then third, I was going to say affordable housing, but that really the trust has the key tool there, the ability to create land for free. And I would say that from the CRD side of things, I think the most important thing would be to apply the gas tax funding that we're going to be receiving, is already in the bank this year, and another $100,000 next year, to make our villages more pedestrian friendly, more cycle friendly, and that applies to both Ganges and Fulford Harbour. Just in terms of water, the key things that have to be done there are watershed management plans, but I think we're all, in the short term, we're going to have to look at aeration of St. Mary Lake. Even if we're successful with watershed planning, we may only be able to, in the end, keep nutrient levels, which is the factor that drives algae blooms and toxic blooms. We may only be able to keep them at current levels, so we may have to actually look at investing in aeration equipment for St. Mary's, and I'm willing to use the gas tax for part of that. So.
Thank you, candidates. So if I might ask Steve Knight to ask our remaining question.
3 representatives in some groups, with some groups being underrepresented by our current system of government. We would like to know how you intend to correct what is widely believed to be a problematic system of governance. Include your thoughts on the current model, incorporation with the trust area as described by the Islanders for Self-Government, the Islands Charter as described by the Slow Islands Movement, or something new and interesting. Feel free.
Well, I've been a trustee for 3 years now, and I can tell you right now our local governance is not working. It has been problematic from the get-go when I got to Trust Council. Just to give you an idea, our budget background papers for this year are projecting $1 million overpayment to the Islands Trust. That's up from $400,000 when I became a trustee in 2002. So that's $600,000 in 3 years. We went from paying 33% of the budget to 41% of the budget, and I figure if nothing changes on the taxation front, by the end of next term we'll be paying 50% of the budget. And so I'm concerned about that. Second of all is the area of representation. 2 trustees can't do the work on this island. It's 25 to 35 hours a week. We go non-stop. Plus we try and have, for those of us who are still working in the community, try and have jobs. And so we need to address the increase in trustees immediately. There is a motion on the table at Trust Council to move that forward, and I'm planning to do that. Then we need to look at the area of, I know, the dreaded incorporation. But I think the restructure study will actually put pressure on the provincial government to come up with their report on what they think the trust should be doing around governance.
So this will be Peter now.
Thank you. I want to begin by challenging Kimberly to come up with where this $1 million figure comes from, because the figures I've seen are nowhere close to that number. And that's another question of having right facts. I want to focus on this inclusive visionary, which I'm not sure Steve mentioned, but it seems to me that what I'm really looking for is to live in what I would call a model community. We're promoted as a great place to visit. I want it to be a great place for people to live and to work. It's one that would be would have not only the environment and all the attractions that we have, but also would have a special form of governance, something that's unique, something that really recognizes the uniqueness of where we are. Yes, there is a need to renew the mandate. There is a need to, reconfirm what is unique about where we live. And I think there is a need to update the legal framework that we operate under. I think a stronger Islands Trust Act does all of that. We can improve the Act, make it work better. I think we improve representation. I don't think the Islands Charter does much differently. It's just a different way of doing it, perhaps more of a codified way of doing it. And I'm not in favor of, at the moment, of proceeding down the path of looking at incorporation again, just 3 years after it was rejected. I think it dilutes the uniqueness that we have. It puts us into more of a regional district type of approach, and I'm not prepared to support that right now.
I find it interesting when I've spoken to people over the last couple of months that the issue of incorporation doesn't come up to me on the street. Since it's raised in meetings all the time, I wonder why that is, that people out there in the community don't seem to think that this is a crucial issue, but people in these meetings raise it. I'm not surprised that we contribute 40% of the budget to the Islands Trust. We do constitute 40% of the population, and the same property on different islands is taxed in exactly the same way. Someone with a $300,000 house on Main Island pays exactly the same amount to the Islands Trust as someone with a $300,000 house on Salt Springs. So I'm not surprised on a population basis that we contribute like that. Anyway, I certainly would support increased representation from Salt Spring Island to the Trust because of the enormously greater population that we have here. That makes sense to me. But I think the Trust is a very valuable tool. I think that preserve and protect mandate recognized by the province 30 years ago is something that really does matter to us and ought to. It's a basis of the sustainability of our economy and our community, and I think losing that would be a crucial thing, a loss for us.
Thanks, George.
Since I have to go, may I just say, not an answer to this, but I mean you no disrespect. I do have to go to, I've got a class of people waiting to dissect Johann Sebastian Bach, or at least his music, if not him, and I can't keep them waiting, so I do apologize for having to leave, but I appreciate having had the opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you.
The comment you made about you only hear about the incorporation issue. I'm sorry. The comment made about only hearing about the incorporation issue in meetings. I hear about it all the time in streets all over the place. So I'm not sure why it's heard in some quarters and not the others. But as representative, I think you should try to tap into that segment of the community that does care about that issue as well.
Well, I agree with you. I can't account for it either. One of the governance things that keeps coming up with me on the street is people not understanding what the CRD does and what the Trust does. That kind of jurisdictional question is raised a lot. But that's the kind of thing that people are asking me.
Yeah, I'm here to.
I respect, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I believe in the Islands Trust. I believe it can be strengthened, and would like to see more representation on the trust with several more trustees to expand representation. I don't want to get into the incorporation question. I've spoken about it before, but and I wouldn't initiate a study, seeing that the majority of at least the community that I've seen hasn't been pushing for that. But if one should go forward, then I think the protect and the preserve mandate has to be continued as provincially legislated. I think that would be absolutely a necessity. We need to have closer relations with the trust area trustees and all the other islands, as well as the CRD. We need to conduct more cost recovery and work to return provincial funding to the trust. We also need to include everybody. We need the youth, First Nations, we need everybody, Joe and Jane Islander, who never gets heard from. On a little more innovative note, I think that we have an opportunity on the island with Salt Spring currency. The Guernsey Island has used their own currency for years to be able to help their own economic model, and it's something I think that we might look at. One more quick one as well is the natural step model of Sweden, which has reinvigorated dying communities, and has been more ecologically minded and producing far more jobs on an ecological basis for young people, bringing in young entrepreneurs. These kinds of models can be looked at, and I think that if we think outside of the box, then we won't be self-contained by that box.
Thank you, Ken. Bill.
Thank you. The province has made it clear, quite clear in the past, that there will be no changes to the trust, and that the only model for changing the system of governance is to incorporate within the trust mandate. It's not going to ruin Salt Spring as we know it. I find it hard to believe that islanders are not wise enough to govern themselves, or that when the corporate structure we could fashion something uniquely Salt Spring. Whether the form is evident that something will have to be done, it's got to be done now, preferably sooner than later. I'm trying to edit my comments down to 1 minute here. It will only come about when sufficient numbers of islanders call upon the province to do something, and possibly the proposed forum on governance might be the way to get the message through to them. Personally, I support any form of local government that is democratically elected by the local population, is sufficient in number to provide a balanced cross-section of people, a diversity of views, and share the workload. And it has to be responsible and accountable to the voters.
Thank you, Bill. So do we goes next?
Gee, it was for sure amazing how this stuff moves around. Your notes are a whole bunch of mush at the end of before the evening's even over, before the speakers are even over. On the incorporation issue just off, there's no need to worry about it. I mean, I've committed to bringing a study up again, which will probably review those places that have gone through this, namely Bowen Island and Souk, in the first 6 months of being in office, so it'll get opened up again. They owe me the $40,000 I turned down about 10 years ago, so shouldn't be any problem financing it. And then we'll find out where it's at. You know, sure, I was worried about how we're going to deal with this whole vision business, and then I thought back of my anthropological time. It takes a vision quest, you know, maybe in a sweat lodge to figure out what to do with Salt Spring Island. You know, an STV issue can derail working on a quarrying and mining bylaw. It's just happened. Something like that could wind up getting grandfathered before anybody knows about it. So the models that are bandied around, I don't know, it's a form of utopianism all over again, the slow Salt Spring movement. I mean, how is that going to work when the time clock is run by somebody else?
Speaking of which, Dietrich.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew exactly that was going to happen. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
And Gary?
Thanks. As I think mostly everyone knows here, I'm not a supporter of incorporation, and my commitment is to try and improve our local form of governance. In the last 3 years, I think I have demonstrated that on the CRD side of things, we can provide effective governance, not to say that it isn't perfect. So my priority will be working on some of the key recommendations that the trustees and I developed for improving our current system, our current rural system, and working with the province to empower the trust and the discussion paper that they're developing. At a very simple level, what we need to do between the trust and CRD is have regularly scheduled meetings. Over the last 3 years, we met perhaps a dozen times, sporadically, irregularly. That obviously has to change. If any kind of municipal council has regularly scheduled meetings, we have to do that. Very simple. The local commission idea, I think, is an interesting one, but I wouldn't support that if it was just set up on the CRD side, because I think that's just a recipe for a power struggle. What I would support is a local trust committee that's also designated as a local commission that could administer CRD services. So you have two people wearing, or sorry, one person wearing two hats.
Fisticuffs, just a minute.
Go ahead, Darlene.
Go ahead. What to do for the future? First of all, I think we need to have a long-term planning committee that looks at our overall needs on the island and comes up with a long-term plan for us. Secondly, I'd like to see the 202 incorporation restructure study updated. I would like to have it brought into line with all of the 2006 figures, which we will have as soon as the information comes from the census. I think the role of the trust needs to be clarified, and we need to look at how the trust could be legislatively tied to a letters of patent document were we to go the incorporation route. As you know, there's a letters of patent document which creates the incorporation, and in order to marry the trust and the letters patent, there would have to be a lot of legislative work done so you would get a proper tie and a proper fit. That needs to be looked at. We need to look at levels of service and tax costs and what the community would get for X amount of dollars. Because one of the things I think that terrified people last time with the incorporation business was that they saw their taxes just shooting right up through the sky.
Thank you, Darlene.
And they were nervous. That can be reviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that, thank you very much, candidates. We know that having homework on during a campaign, but we know too that those are questions that you've had an opportunity to think about, and it shows in your answers. Thank you again for answering our prepared questions. Now, if you will, from the floor, if you have a pithy and succinct question, if you'll stand up and identify yourself, and as required, you can leave it open to all candidates, or to trust candidates, or to CRD candidates, and or an individual. The answers, again, we'll try and keep to 1 minute, and I will cut you off. And you've all had 75 seconds, so your responses will have to be slightly shorter in this round. First question? Go ahead from here. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I see that there's a lot of concern about farming and about governance and about tourism, and what's missing for me as a builder is there's nothing about building. And municipalities across Canada and the United States have adopted more green, sustainable building practices. A natural step. It was great to hear about that. There's green build. There is thank you. There is green build. There is LEED. All kinds of municipal initiatives to ensure that the building practices of a community are environmental, and that's missing for me in this conversation. So I'd like to hear how you feel about that.
Anyone want to take that on? Go ahead, Kimberly.
Well, we don't have the ability as the Islands Trust to actually get into the structures of how green the structures are. We tried to push Channel Ridge to, when they were doing their development permit, to build in as much green into their project as they could in terms of the sewer and water and all of that sort of stuff. And so I guess on the land use side of things, I think when we want to talk about best management practices for developers, which could lead into green building practices on the building side of things, and so that's where the trust would do it. One of the issues that is before the trust is a development approval information bylaw that would set the fence posts for developers when they're coming in with their applications to know what they had to do before they ever started their application process in terms of environmental environmental assessments in terms of water management, in terms of sewer and all of that sort of stuff. So we weren't dragging the application process on needlessly, asking for study after study as we realized we needed them. So that would encourage green development of land, and I would guess it would be a CRD person who would have to actually answer the building side of stuff.
Peter, Peter, and then Darlene. Anybody else want to answer this? And Ken? Gary? Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Construction is certainly a very important part of the economy. It's actually a larger employer than tourism, so it really is key. I think part of the vision I had in terms of us being seen as a model community is part of that too, is that we are seen to have those kind of innovative ways of building our community, and as Mayor has shown, that we do have award-winning design on the island. So I'd like to see that, and certainly would want to support that as much as we can as the Trust.
Thanks. I'm really glad you brought up the whole question around ecological sustainable building. I think there are a lot of projects that can be happening on this island, or models that have been developed around the world that just because we haven't seen them before doesn't mean they aren't already laid out, that there's ways for us to be able to take those models and apply them to our community, which I think that the size of our community and the kind of people that we are, we can actually do that. I think that as a trust, we're able to do things like education projects, which would help people to be able to access this information. Local government should also have the ability to help maybe link federal and provincial grants or studies that would help to fund these kinds of projects. And I think we have a gas tax that's coming into the island. I think since it's here because of our use of oil and gas, maybe we should use that to go towards alternative energies like biodiesel and veggie fuels that are...
Thanks, Ken.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Cranoff. I'm very concerned about incorporating as many green things as we can in our community. And specifically, my one experience with this has been around the discussion about the building of the indoor pool complex. And it is an issue for me that we should be building into that indoor pool complex every single green feature that we can possibly afford, because in the long term it will save us money, it saves the environment, and it's good for everybody. I would like to see such things, for instance, as geothermal heat, radiant heat sinks which collect sun. I'd like to see water reclamation so that the water can be recycled and reused 2 or 3 times. I'd like to see education around issues of water conservation and basically using as much rainwater as we can in trying to bolster our water. The kinds of plumbing features that we would put in the pool, as an example, can
Great.
decrease
Thank you,
water
Darlene.
consumption greatly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary, did you want to? And then
Yeah.
Bill, did you have a? Yeah.
In terms of any fundamental kind of regulatory changes, like changing the building code, I'd have to educate myself on that, Mayor. And but just to mention a couple of things that I have done in my past term. The CRD, I requested at the board, and the board applied their low flush toilet requirement to the electoral areas, whereas before they were only going to apply them to the core areas. One of the most important things you can do in terms of energy is keep settlement patterns intact. That's why I support the library being in the village, but that's a trust matter, and it's an OCP provision right now. The CRD is working on guidelines for water storage for potable water use, and in terms of the pool, I'm absolutely committed to borrowing more money if need be, but what I have accepted the Parks Commission recommendation, which is let's get some operating experience with the pool before we decide on what our next best investment is going to be. We're already investing in heat recovery measures for the pool.
My feeling is that as far as the CRD itself is concerned, it can and it will, I guess, if it's gets the right cues, it will promote and endorse green practices. So it's a matter of looking at the building code and seeing what innovations can be made. I mean, you've got in Galliano the building possibility where you're just where they just make sure that it's not a fire hazard and it's electrically safe. The owner-builder thing. So it depends on what fits the island, and I'm sure that the organization will promote it and will endorse it, and that in turn will draw a lot of attention. I think it's more a promotion thing than anything else. I haven't thought beyond the promotion end at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Bill?
Yes. I assure you that everything green that can be put into the pool is in the pool. We have a collection of engineers and scientists who have been on our advisory process, and anything that will pay back within 10 years is going in. Mayor, in your questions, you mentioned other jurisdictions 3 times that are doing things that you would like to see us do here. And I think you named those other jurisdictions 3 times. You said municipal, municipal, municipal. That is the way to go. We need our own governance here on the island where we make the rules.
In last week's Driftwood, I read two interesting articles about the Galliano situation in the McMillan-Blodell land, and you know, some issue that's been going on there for 10 years, and these people now are being evicted from their property. And that indeed, I understand that some of their property, in order to have a building permit or to live on that property, had to be covenanted to the Sierra Club. And I guess this goes back to the governance issue about being somewhat vulnerable when you have all your decisions made by 2 trustees and 1 CRD director. So Peter, what kind of assurance in the event you get elected to trust, what kind of assurance can you give us that a similar thing can't happen here? In other words, that these people are neighbors of people on Galliano Island, and I think they've been treated shamefully by the trust. And so I'd like to have your comment on that. And also a comment about a third party like a Sierra Club being granted a covenant
minute, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Just getting warmed up. I might run myself next time.
Only if we're incorporated.
Yeah.
Kevin, I'm not familiar with the article you mentioned. Can you explain a little better?
Oh, thank you, Peter.
So, last week in the Driftwood, I think there was McMillan-Blodell land that was sold in 1995 on Galliano Island. That some number, I don't know the number of people that have a home on those pieces of property are now being evicted because there's some zoning requirement. I mean, these are large pieces of property, and part of that article, maybe Penny, she's here, she's probably read it. Talked about covenanting that land to the Sierra Club, which sounded really peculiar that you'd have some third-party organization being covenanted land and these people not being allowed to live on it. I don't know enough about it, Peter, but it sounds sort of queer. So.
Well, I certainly don't know the details of that one, but covenanting of land is done on Salt Springs, done on all over the province. It's covenanting of special features on the land. Whether that involves eviction of people, I don't know. Not normally it's done. It would be an agreement made with the landowner that certain areas were worth protecting and would be covenanted on title. I certainly would not do that willingly. I would have to know what the circumstances were.
I can tell you what it's about. On Galliano, the old forest lots that were McMillan-Blodell lots did not have residential capability on those properties. And so when McMillan-Blodell sold those lots and they were subdivided by Galliano, there was no residential capability. And so a whole bunch of homeowners bought them. And in order to get to the residential capability to put your home on that lot, there was an agreement made then of the local trust committee and this conservation agency that they would have to covenant 75% of their land. And the trust was taken to court on that matter, and there was a big, huge battle, and they're still fighting it out. And now there's 3 property owners on Galliano who are going to be evicted because they built homes and they haven't covenanted the required 75% of their land in order to get the residential dwelling.
Thanks for
I
clarifying.
believe they're like 20-acre lots.
Let's talk a little bit about Salt Spring Island if we can. So we've got a question in the back.
My name is Ross McLeod, and I'm here representing Salt Spring Coffee Company. Almost 30 years ago, my brother Mickey and I started organic market gardening on Salt Spring. And at that time, KNR and red and white hardly even knew what organics was. But we persisted, and 10 years ago, Mickey started Salt Spring Coffee Company, with the cornerstone being sustainability and organics. Today, the manufacturing portion of Salt Spring Coffee has outgrown its location. And I want to ask, I don't know who to ask, but I want to ask somebody up there, what are the plans for Salt Spring for growing businesses like Salt Spring Island? What is the zoning going to be to allow growth for a company like Salt Spring Coffee that now employs 60 people from starting from zero 10 years ago?
Thanks, Ross.
You're going to have a bit of a difficulty because it's going to require an OCP amendment, because right now we have the existing industrial zoning that you would require to allow you to manufacture the coffee has been set at its current level. So you can transfer industrial zoning from another part of the island, but we don't have the ability to create new industrial zoning. So if you wanted to stay where you are and expand. And so you'd have to put an application in for rezoning with the required OCP amendment, and it could move forward. But just to let you know that in this climate, there's been a lot of opposition to any kind of changes to the OCP to allow that kind of stuff. And so you have to be prepared for a battle, because there's people in this community who would be against it.
I've heard this whole evening about sustainability, about employing people on Salt Spring, about tourism. I mean, Salt Spring Coffee.
Well, then you have to talk to these.
Excuse me before I finish. Salt Spring Coffee and its rematched manufacturing of coffee from fair trade communities around the world is not industrial, it's commercial.
But that's the zoning that you would require. It's classified as manufacturing. And I'm not saying I'm against your expanding your business. It's just that the last 3 years, there's been a lot of organized community groups who have fought every single application that has come forward. And so,
I'm interested to know how many people there are on Salt Spring Island that are doing businesses illegally in their basements, in their backyards, in their houses, that there are no places for them to go.
I don't know. Nobody's complained about them.
Well, they're hiding because they don't want to talk to you.
Ross, let me answer this. I know there are about 10,000 acres of land on the island that's zoned for agriculture, ALO land. Only about 60% is in farm classification, so there is a large potential of land that's vacant. I don't see why what you're talking about couldn't be done on agricultural land. As we mentioned before, that there's very little being done. There's only about 140 acres being operated by organic gardeners, growers. So I think there is potential to do that. In terms of an operation, I think that's something that we should look at. We have said that the OCP, we want to respect the OCP, but I think changes to the OCP can be made, provided there's a community benefit, some economic benefit.
Just so you know, Salt Spring Coffee has a very aggressive plan afoot to work with agriculture and sustainability here on the island, and if something like that is available, that would be very well received.
Okay, can I turn it back to the corner question? Thank you.
I'm Julia Hankler. My husband and I have run the fishery group since 1992. I also teach at high school, and I'm on maternity leave. We're young. Parents aren't so young, but we have young children here, and they're going through the school system. Salt Spring Island has the opportunity to secure some significant federal funding over the next 3 to 5 years towards creating a comprehensive community safety initiative. This would address not only crime and crime prevention, but also the socioeconomic roots and issues that contribute to crime. Real engagement and involvement from local government representatives is necessary. Do you support this initiative, and how can you contribute and involve yourself?
Thank you, Julia. Coming from the RCMP station and victim services, I've been working for 4 years on getting some kind of initiative such as this. We did the sexual exploitation of youth study. We've done all sorts of studies in the community, and they've paid off. Thank you to SWOVA and the work that they've done in the school system. We've actually become a pilot project, one of 6 communities in the province, and we have the ability to secure $1 million over the next 5 years to do projects. I will do whatever it takes, Julia, because I see the end result of what happens when you don't have a safe and crime-free community. So it will address things like affordable housing. It will deal with the pedestrian safety issues on the GVM corridor. It will deal with a wide variety of issues in our community, and it'll make our community safer. Over the last 4 years, I've heard people say, I don't feel safe. And I know the crime statistics, and I find a real disconnect between what's actually happening in our community and what people are feeling. And I'm hoping this next 5 years we can get to people to understand just how safe our community is.
Thank you, Kimberly. Anybody else on the panel? Yes.
Thanks. I've thought about this question quite a bit, actually. First of all, Salt Springs is easily the safest place I've ever lived in across Canada. I've never had a key to my house, and I don't expect I'll ever get a key offered, and I'm glad that that's the way it goes. Sorry about if anyone is a locksmith. In terms of crime on the island, I've seen kind of 4 general areas where they seem to manifest. One is out of just basic ignorance, and I think that a solution there is providing knowledge for people when it comes to specific kind of activities called crime. Other issues are around mental health and disparity, and I think those are definitely where we need to step up as a community to be supportive. Again, if we're able to deal with these issues, we're able to eliminate the concerns around crime. The other one is boredom. I mean, realistically, we need to be able to provide positive places for people to put their energy, and the more that we do have that, I think that we'll just keep this community safe.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel?
Just quickly, as an elected rep, I supported the funding request for that initiative and have been participating to a certain extent in the discussions on it, and would continue to do so. I think there's a number of things that CRD has been and will be involved in that should be coordinated with the committee's work. Grants and aid, modest grants and aid could help support the funding, although it does seem there's adequate funding there. One issue that was mentioned was pedestrian safety, and I've made the application of the gas tax funding that we're going to be receiving over the next 5 years. I've made the #1 priority for that, safety for pedestrians and cyclists in and around the village, because the funding is ideally suited for that. You can only use it for capital. So you could buy a bus, but you can't operate a bus. But for promoting pedestrian safe walkways and cycling lanes in and around the village where you get the biggest bang for your buck, that's my priority for that funding.
Thank you, Gary. Darlene?
Thank you. As a lawyer, I have a bit of a law and order background, and I would be very delighted to work with any group in the community that was interested in promoting public safety. I'm also very, very interested and concerned about the children of our community, the teens of our community, who seem not to have enough activities and places and events to attend, consequently spending an inordinate amount of time in Centennial Park. I would really like to see some energy devoted to this group of folk so that maybe something more positive could happen for them. I'd be prepared to work for that.
Thank you.
Julia, this subject could easily be referred to the Pedestrian Safety Committee that both Gary and I are on, and maybe we can expand the mandate of that one and address it from there, because it's a timely one. I consider the place a safe place to be, but obviously there are different perceptions and different experiences, and these things need to be explored and brought out into the open. Thank you.
Thank you. Dietrich. Thank you, Dietrich. Dewart, you're next.
Thank you. In an environment where the provincial government is looking forward over the next number of years to dramatically increase tourism in the province, I'd like to ask Ken and Peter, if your vision is successful and implemented over the next few years, do you see tourism increasing on the island, or is it your goal to have it decrease?
I can see that with a sustainable development, as far as I'm concerned, when you look around the world where sustainable models have actually been developed, it is good for the economy, it's good for the tourism, because more people want to actually come for the exact same reasons why we actually moved here in the first place. I think when you've actually fulfilled the preserve and protect and facilitated a year-round sustainable economy, you draw more people in who want to come and see the place, not just for its natural beauty, but for its unique culture, which I think a lot of people do come here for that. So in my mind, we, aside from really needing to look at how many people can be on the island, in the sense of going back to the carrying capacity, I think that we get either the same or more tourists, but it would be the type of tourism that's maybe more in depth for looking at sustainability.
I could do it. I certainly have no plan in mind to reduce the amount of tourism on the island. Certainly, tourism is a key part. I said in my response before, is a key part of the local economy. But it has to be the right kind of tourism. That's sure you probably agree with it. And I don't think anybody's suggesting that we just open it up unfettered to anybody that wants to come. It has to be managed, and I think the idea of a tourism management plan as part of the visioning of where we're going is a very key part of it. I think everybody needs to be involved. This is not just a business matter. It involves all sectors of the community, residents and others, and farmers. So I think tourism, if we protect the island the way we want to protect it and keep it the natural beauty that we have, we all enjoy, if we keep that intact, then I think visitors will want to come, and we want to have them come.
Can I make one comment, Peter?
Yes.
I've heard it often said this environmental tourism, and we want people to have a light footprint here, take their garbage away with them. But I would have to tell you, from a retail perspective, the boaters that come to the island drop a lot of money in the retail businesses, and they're an extremely important part. And the trust has managed to kick the marina in the teeth lately, and I'd love to hear somebody question about that.
Yeah. Well, I think a marina question is pending, and I think that Dewart directed the question originally to Peter and Ken, and I think because we may be aware of your position on that, and we'll make sure that the CRD representatives get another question from the floor. But for the moment, our next in line is yourself, Robin. Congratulations on becoming a member of the Chamber of Commerce, by the way.
Do I need the mic, or can I speak?
I'm sure we can hear you.
Well, first of all, for those of you who know me, I speak my mind, I hold nothing back, and I'm really kind of disgusted that George has left the meeting, regardless of it. I traveled a long way to get here. I travel here all the time to get here. George isn't here to answer the questions, and perhaps it's by design. So he's left his twin here to answer the questions, and so let me ask him. My question is to Peter Lyon. Peter, as past president of the Salt Spring Island Conservancy, you have over the past 3 years written numerous letters to the Islands Trust clearly expressing your views on and attending in person numerous trust committee meetings and speaking on density transfers, vacation rentals, channel ridge, zoning applications, alternative governance, and of course the Ganges Marina. In fact, no other single identity has expressed their opinions in writing as often as you have. And I could not find one letter of support. The Islands Trust Policy Manual, under bias, states, a trustee must not participate in a decision in respect of which he or she does not have an open mind or was not amenable to persuasion when applicable, affected or interested parties before participating in the decision. The participation could result in the trustee's vote being invalid, and in some cases the decision itself being invalid. How can you possibly expect to convince anyone you will suddenly now change and become of an open mind? You will obviously need to excuse yourself on the issues currently before the Islands Trust, awaiting application, or face the outcry of bias from every applicant. You will effectively, and by following the letter of the Islands Trust Policy Manual, be an ineffective trustee. Any decisions will go into limbo. That is, of course, unless that is your agenda. Thank you.
Well, I first take great exception to your allegation that George left the meeting deliberately. It was known ahead of time that he had to leave. I don't know where to start, Mr. Kellon, on responding. First, I want to clear up one thing, that as president of the Conservancy, I never took any position on behalf of the Conservancy with respect to vacation rentals. I did take a position with respect to the marina application, and it was founded on the infill of the harbour as being something that we would object to. We asked consistently for more information to be provided. I think if we'd been trustees, if I'd been elected and a trustee at the time, I would have asked for that information right up front, not dragged it out over 3 years. This development approval information process that Gordon mentioned is something that I asked the trust to think about a year ago, and now suddenly it's been put forward. It's a process that was allowable, was permitted by local trust committees since 1998 and hasn't been applied. My arguments, let me put this very simply, my arguments as president of the Conservancy for or proposing marine application wasn't that we don't want the Marines to be there, not that we didn't want the park, those land protect, but simply we thought that the trade-off that the community was getting wasn't good enough. And we made those points consistently to the trustees. If I'm elected, you certainly know how I feel about it. I can't disguise that. I can't take back what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, but I will certainly consider any application that comes before me with an open mind, not an empty mind, but an open mind, and deal with it on its merits.
Thank you, Peter. Questions from the floor? Eric?
You're as closed-minded as they ever come, Peter. Sorry to say that.
No, come on.
Hi.
Could you identify yourself, please?
My name's Eric Booth, and the question I have, because of the limited amount of time, I was going to ask it of everybody, but I think under the circumstances, I'll ask Gary, Ken, and Peter for an answer on it. And it primarily revolves around the question of incorporation. Do you be surprised? The question I've got is, could you give me the top 3 reasons why status quo form of governance is superior to the municipal model? Okay, so just the things that are so different right now that would be changed under the municipal model. So looking for the top 3 benefits to where we are right now. Because we've heard a lot this evening about what improvements could be made. What I'd like to know is, what is the real driving force behind keeping the status quo form of governance?
So fair enough. Ken, then Gary, then Peter.
I guess I'm kind of receiving this question in a slightly different way. Part of the reason, first of all, and we've talked about this already, that I haven't expressed a direct interest in corporation is that having talked to, and someone mentioned it earlier that maybe I'm not talking to the right people, but I have quite an overlapping background with healthcare, with small business, with young people on the island, and realistically I have not heard them speak about these particular issues. When I have talked to people in the community and a diversity of people, it still seems there's a majority that just wants to leave the question alone in terms of what had happened with the previous election. So that's just what I'm giving from what I've got from other people. That's why I wouldn't personally initiate this study. I also think that the trust is able to act in a far more efficient way in terms of the taxes that are being given off to other islands. I think in terms of jurisdiction, we are able to do a lot more that just, I myself, that's a part of why I want to be on this trust, so I can see what's really possible within the trust, because I don't think that we get that in the community.
Thank you. Gary, do you want to go next, and then Peter?
Thanks, Eric. Well, I'm a politician, not a statesman like yourself, but the 3 most important reasons were there was a 70% no vote 4 years ago. The second reason, I believe that incorporation would not see as effective and forceful application of the preserve and protect mandate both on Salt Spring and particularly for the rest of the trust area. I think Salt Spring has a responsibility to implementing that mandate on the other trust islands. It's part of the social contract. And I believe that you shouldn't just separate out the subsidy that we give to other islands, although I have, as you know, consistently taken the view that there should be a better deal for Salt Spring. But I'm not separating out Salt Spring subsidies to the other Gulf Islands when we don't think about ways in which we're subsidized. The Southern Gulf Islands contribute $450,000 a year for our hospital facilities. We've got the hospital. So it seems like on Salt Spring, those who favor incorporation are only oppose subsidies when they don't benefit from them.
Thank you, Gary. Peter?
Thank you. I think Gary and Ken have covered some of the points I would make, but let me make 3 points of my own. One is I think incorporation, and I said this before, dilutes the emphasis on preserve and protect. I think the fact of merging the services under an incorporation model, I know it's under the trust umbrella, but I think it dilutes our emphasis as a trust. With the Trust Act, with a special act of the province, preserve and protect is fundamental to what we do, and I don't think that incorporation really helps. Secondly, I think it is a unique form of governance, and I'm really pleased that we have that. I think the Trust made a very brave decision back in 1974 to have a special act for this area. And I think that's something really important. And I think the incorporation is a sort of a municipal urban model, and I don't think it really fits with our uniqueness. And thirdly, and Gary mentioned it, responsibility to other islands. I think we do have responsibility, much as provinces have responsibility to other provinces. I take exception to maybe ask Eric, where these numbers come from when he started talking about a 16% increase in trust and resellers for next year. The budget hasn't even been fixed for next year. So coming out with those kind of numbers, the numbers that Kimberly came out with, like $1 million overpayment, well, I don't know where those numbers come from, but they're very emotional numbers and get people really excited. I think we need to have the facts on the table first, of just what is happening with the trust right now.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm on the Financial Planning Committee, and I have the preliminary budget sitting on my computer, and I've gone over that budget. They're projecting a 12% increase if we adopt all of the projects. We normally hammer it down to about a 5% increase, and even if we adopted a 5% increase, we're looking at $800,000 as an increase. So the $1 million is at the top end of the scale. We're probably looking at about $800,000 realistically, and I confirmed that with Linda Adams today when I talked to her before I came to this meeting. So those are the numbers. But in terms of diluting the emphasis on preserve and protect, the Islands Trust Act recognizes municipalities as a form of government. So you can't tell me that the province didn't recognize municipalities as a form of government when they did the act, because it's right there. In terms of a unique form of government, again, I have to tell you, the Islands Trust Act recognizes municipalities. We can either be a local trust committee, and when we grow, we can consider incorporation as a way to govern ourselves under the Islands Trust Act. And if you're concerned about preserve and protect, what we need to do is amend the Local Government Act and the Islands Trust Act to legally bind the preserve and protect mandate to the municipality, and then every single service that we provide under that local government will be covered by the preserve and protect mandate, not just land use planning.
Can I say something to that too? I don't think there's any need to argue about this. I mean, I've committed to bringing back a study within the first 6 months. Basically, it'll involve closely looking at Souk and at Bowen Island, who will by then have had a good number of years in incorporated status. So we'll see what they've done, and we'll see what it stacks up, or what their experience has been. It'll be a retrospective on that experience. Let's take it from there. I mean, let's not get ourselves up in a lather, but let's make sure we choose right at election time for those who are actually prepared to look into this seriously. That's where you should be concerned. Get those out who are willing to bring the study forward and put them in there. Thank you.
Okay. The question was 3 favorite things about the status quo. Darlene, it looks like you wanted to speak to that.
Yes, I don't want to speak to the 3 favorite things.
That was the question.
I wanted to respond to a comment that Kimberly and Dietrich made, and that is that when I met with Derek Trimmer, who is the provincial expert on the Local Government Act, he said that one mistake that was made when we did our original Island Trust legislation was that we did not put into it a definitive legislative link, which would link that trust document to a municipal letters of patent. And that can be done, that amendment can be made, that protect and preserve can be strengthened. It can run through to a municipality.
Last one to Tom. Thank you.
My question is for Bill Curtin and Gary Goldman. It's connected with the swimming pool and my tax dollar. In the summer, Bill chaired a meeting for the public, and Gary was there. And Bill said, in a matter of fashion, that the amount of the referendum, the money required for the pool was at such a level that the Parks and Recreation Board said, my goodness, the community will never go for that amount. So therefore, we reduced it to what you thought the community would vote for. Now you said something along that line at the public meeting, and it was reported in the newspaper, and Gary Holman said it was correct, and he said, I guess the voters will tell us at the end. Personally, I would really like to thank both of you for the tremendous amount of time that you've both spent in your community endeavors. But I sort of speak on leadership. And quite frankly, as a taxpayer, I was misled, and I didn't know anything about it. Would you do that again if that opportunity came up? Just a simple yes or no. Or you may wish to rationalize why you did it at the time.
Hey, I'll go first. No, I do remember a comment being made about the referendum amount and how we decided on that number. Of course, we underestimated those capital costs significantly, which virtually every community in the last several years that have built a recreation centers have experienced the same thing. My hometown Mission, they were upgrading their swimming pool and ice rink at a cost of in the order of $7 million, and that's doubled on them. So the same thing happened to us, and what I said at the meeting, I'm not going to say what Bill said, but what I said is that the commission, and I'm a commissioner, should take responsibility for the fact that we underestimated costs, period, end of story. We just underestimated. I absolutely deny that that number was cooked up so that we could get a yes vote. So I didn't say what I think you said I said. If that's not too complicated. But the one thing that the commission did say that I felt bound by as well, which is if we get the $2 million provincial grant, which we ended up getting, that amount would be applied to reduce the amount of borrowing, and that was stated very explicitly, and I felt as an elected official that I was bound by that as well, and that's in part why we got into this debate and controversy around the leisure pool, because there were, in effect, in my view, two contradictory promises made. One about 3 bodies of water, and the other about using the provincial grant to reduce the amount of borrowing. And we're moving forward on the basis of that, and we're moving forward one step at a time. But I absolutely did not, we have to take responsibility as commissioners. We made the best call we could on capital costs with advice from an architect. And that absolutely was not cooked up. And if we made a mistake, then we've got to take responsibility for it.
Thank you, Gil, for the question. It's always good to be able to clarify an issue. The original full-blown, full meal deal pool was very costly. We had to make a decision to phase it and put it in smaller pieces. At the time that the community was surveyed, the willingness to pay began to disappear at the $75 mark. The amount that we went to referendum for was to build something within the tolerance level of the community. We did not ask the community to pay the costs that would be necessary to build a huge, luxurious, not in keeping with our community needs pool. The level that the community indicated through survey that they were comfortable with was $75. So we built a $75 per household pool.
Thank you, Bill. Tom, you will still have the last word. I missed Sabine's hand, so that's a question. Real quick answers, please.
I will support doing that. One of the concerns I had over the last 3 years is when you read articles in American newspapers, and I have an article here from the Seattle Times, and one of the growing area of tourism in our island is non-resident owners who buy vacation homes here, and they stay here a couple of months of the year. They pay full taxes for that privilege, but they use our businesses. And you have somebody sitting at this table who said, Lamb, the existing structure no longer copes. He was talking about incorporation. The growing problem is millionaire vacation homeowners who have driven up land prices but spend little time on the island. The worst thing about a second home is that owners have no allegiance to the community. He says they don't volunteer and they don't contribute. I think that's hogwash. They contribute every single day that they come into Thrifty's and buy their groceries. They contribute every single day when they go to Sabine's and buy books. They contribute every single day when they bring their friends and families here who do the same things. I think we need as a community to turn our head around vacationers. They don't come and just stay in vacation rentals and bed and breakfast and stay at their friends. They buy homes and stay here as well. And if we want tourists to come,
shouldn't be promoting tourist facilities that attract, that attract tourists, that are looking for the kind of activities and facilities that are not appropriate for the island, not appropriate for an island that we want to protect our environment, our scenic beauty here. And I think that's what I'm talking about, is whether we actively promote that. The other aspect about it, and I think Sabine's is an ideal example of a business that can survive year-round, but it does depend on the residents doing it and supporting it year-round. The problem with the tourists that come in the summer months, and we know what that does to the peak, the demand on services and on the community. It is a peak demand. It's only really that important in the summer months. And what I'm suggesting is that we should be looking at those kinds of activities, those kinds of visitors that will stay here longer than a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that'll stay, that really promotes a year-round kind of activity, that kind of ecotourism type of activity, or other things that can spread the load. I think the idea of building up the residential base of the island is important for year-round business. And that's where I think the vacation rental issue really misses it, is that we need to make sure that we have a good, solid, viable, resident-centered community.